Chapter 19 of the Guardian of Ailos. All of Nelson's attempts to stop Sid from going after her mother failed, miserably. How in the world was he supposed to convince her to let her mother leave again? No matter how hard he pressed, she insisted on staying. Sid kept trying to walk over to the doors, and so in his frustration, Nelson threw himself between her and the throne room, and soon he found himself face down on the ground, head squeezed up against cold stone. Sid's strength seemed to be improving fast. He puffed out a defeated breath and watched sparkles of dust shimmering in the... Wait, he thought. That's it. Maybe I don't have to convince her to leave. Maybe we can find another way. Sid, look, he mumbled with his cheek squished between her palm and the floor. He pointed through the door and up toward the ceiling. A single beam of light stretched down over a golden throne. Nelson, I'm not going to fall for that. You can't trick me into leaving. I'm not trying to trick you. He used his arms and all his strength he had to lift his head. Sid reluctantly relented. I have an idea. One that can get all of us out of here, alive. Okay, Sid took her knee out of his back and let go of the arm she had twisted up with it. Nelson groaned as he turned himself over and peeled himself up off the floor. So, she said, standing up, I'm listening. Thank you, Nelson said as he shook the dust from his hair. Okay, so you stay here just in case things get crazy, while I go up and get Sheila and Harold. Again, Sid scoffed. Nelson, there's potentially a massive dragon in there. What is Sheila going to do? Peck him to death? No, Nelson said, rolling his eyes. Sheila and I will wait for you to give us a signal. He lifted up his stone. Then we will fly down and pick you up. Sid scrunched her face and thought. I don't get it. How does that help my mom? Think about it, Nelson continued. 2 potential ways out. One through the tunnels, the other, Nelson pointed up to the beam of light, through that hole. All right, Sid said, cocking her head. I see it. But that is one crazy plan. She put a hand on his shoulder. Are you sure you're up for it? Me? Nelson smiled. It felt good to be on the other side of adventure. Of course I am, he said, testing the authenticity. He waited for the doubt to come, but it never did. The real question is, are you? That seemed to take a lot out of you. His eyes traveled to the faint glow of the blue around her neck. Pfft, Sid waved her hand. I'm good. And I think your cheek would agree. She was referencing the mark left from their little scuffle, a clever distraction for her weak knees. Truth was, she didn't know if she had it in her, but she liked this plan better than leaving her mom behind. Nelson rubbed at the cold mark on his cheek and rolled his eyes, oblivious to Sid's wavering. Yeah, anyway, now that I have one of these, Nelson lifted up his stone again, I can use it to talk to you, I think. You think? I'm pretty sure. There's a weird connection between these lockets. That's how your mom, Rose, did it from the forest. Okay, Sid nodded, mulling it over. Is there a way to test it? Like, what if it doesn't work? Nelson pinched his chin. That's a good question. He studied the small rock in his hand. The gold light faintly pulsed. The light, he thought. Maybe we could use that. Yeah, he said, looking up at Sid with renewed excitement. How about this? He held up the stone and whispered a phrase. It started to glow. If the talking thing doesn't work, he waved a hand over the light. We use Morse code. Nice. Yeah, I think that could work. The cold on Nelson's cheek warmed as he blushed. Great. We don't have much time, Nelson said, stepping away from the wall. As soon as he did, a rumbling, horrible laugh slipped through the crack. That can't be good, Sid said. You think that's him? Stay here, Nelson whispered. The reality of them not being alone finally kicked in. Remember, if anything happens, just call. With that, Nelson took the stone and shoved it in his pocket. Don't do anything I wouldn't, Nelson said with a smirk. Then he ran. This is Chapter 20 of The Guardian of Ailos. Sid watched from behind the giant doors as the dragon threw her mother across the room. Her body tensed as she watched her mother slide in front of her. She wanted to help. Her instinct urged her forward. She started through the cracked doors, but her legs still lacked the strength. They felt like jelly, like she had just returned home from a long sea voyage. She braced herself up against the wall in defeat. The dragon soon filled the entire view, and Sid gasped as it pressed its massive talon into her mother's chest. The sound, although too quiet for the dragon to hear, caught Rose's attention. With a glance, she made eye contact. Then Sid swore she heard a whisper. I have it. At first, Sid didn't quite understand. The image of her mother being crushed beneath the dragon had her thoughts swimming. The only words she could focus on were the dragon's. His mockery filled her with anger. Sid gripped the locket tightly up against her chest. A small surge of energy passed through her. You hear that? Nelson's voice sounded inside of her mind, as clear as if he was still standing next to her. What is going on? Sid thought, confused in the midst of the chaos. It wasn't until Nelson's voice returned that she understood it all. We did it, he said. We're going to make it out of here. I'm almost to the top. Just give me another minute. Sid put two and two together. He must have heard her mom through the locket too. She has it. The third stone. We have it, she whispered, letting reality sink in. Her body relaxed as hope washed over her. With all three gems, they could defeat the dragon. They could bind him forever. They could go home. Home, she thought. My mom is coming home. She was finally going to have her whole family, something she never could remember. Thoughts of her dad and all the questions he might have rushed in. Thoughts of dinner and Friday pizza nights, of braiding hair and soccer. Another surge of energy flooded her body. The sea legs started wearing off. Then, the sound of rolling thunder interrupted her daydream and snapped her back to reality. The dragon towered above her mother, neck craned and glowing bright. He's about to. A wave of liquid fire rushed toward her. She dove out of the way, tumbling into the stone table just as splashes of molten rock squeezed through the door. The sudden move made her feel dizzy, and the room tilted and shook as she climbed her way back to her feet. Thick, black smoke began pouring into the room, and something followed with it, moving fast. Sid squinted, trying to make out the blurry figure running toward her. A bright red glow that repelled the darkness surrounded it, revealing a person. Swirls of smoke retreated with every step. Sid recognized the voice first. Sid, are you okay? Rose asked, rushing over to her daughter's side. What are you doing here? You were supposed to be back at the cave by now. Sid looked dazed, her eyes an open tomb, blank and unbelieving. There was no way someone could survive that. Her mouth fell open, but no words came out. Sid, look at me. Breathe. Rose took her daughter's head in her hands. Where's Nelson? We don't have time. Sid just pointed at the doors. Her mind still couldn't catch up. He's in there? Rose asked frantically. Sid shook her head. He went to get Sheila. How are you? Don't worry about that now. Come on. Rose grabbed Sid's arm and stabilized her. We have to. Before her mind could compute what happened next, Sid found herself floating in midair, watching the doors in front of her explode. The sound of the explosion came only after landing on the other side of the decimated stone table. Adrenaline filled her veins, and like morning fog being burned off by the sun, her mind sharpened. Every detail clicked into place. Her mother's scream came next, one of pain. Sid scrambled around the debris and found her sitting up against what looked like the top slab of the table. "My leg," Rose said. "It's stuck." Sid quickly assessed the situation. A large piece of black marble had her mother's leg pinned up against the base of the table. "I'm going to move it, but it's probably going to hurt." Rose nodded with a grimace. "Do it." Sid counted to 3 and then lifted the rock. The marble proved to be too heavy for moving. Rose grunted in pain as Sid lifted. It didn't go far, but she got at least one side of the wall piece high enough off the ground for her mom to pull free. Together, they made it to their feet and started to hobble back toward the congregation of benches. Rose pointed to a row of benches just to their left. "We need to hide." Sid pulled her mom close to help relieve the pressure on her injured leg and moved as fast as she could. She picked a row that had a massive chunk of door resting on it and helped her mom slide under it. Then off to her left, a faint glow grabbed Sid's attention. She held out her hand. Her locket still rested in her palm. Nelson had the other, and... "Oh no," she gasped. "The third gem. My mom must have dropped it during the explosion." Sid saw it lying a few feet to the right of the stone table, nestled under some broken marble. "What? What is it?" Rose peeked up at Sid from under the hideout. "Stay here," Sid said. "I'll be right back." She turned to walk away, but then paused. She took her locket and handed it to her mom. "Hold on to this. Heal if you can." Without hesitation, Sid bounded over the top of the benches. When she reached the stone table, she felt the floor begin to shake. A low growl followed. As discreetly as possible, she pressed her back up against the rubble and reached for the gem. As soon as she heard the sound of the dragon's breath, she withdrew. Puffs of smoke billowed around her as the dragon sniffed the air. "A child?" He laughed. "I smell you, girl," Archalos hissed. "Do you really think you can escape me? Even with your precious stone?" Looking up, Sid saw the chin of the dragon pass over, his teeth dripping hot saliva. "You two are no match for me," the dragon gnashed his teeth. Sid pressed farther against the rubble. Goosebumps shot down her arms. Her skin felt cold and sweat started to bead around her neck. This was the first time she saw him. A few days before, she didn't even think dragons were real. But there she was, sitting inches away from one. For good measure, she raised her hands to cover her mouth. One slight sound and she could be done for. Sid held her breath until the head of the dragon disappeared back behind the stone table. Her lungs burned as she let a small amount of air back in. "Come now, my dear," Archalos pleaded, his voice softening as if to persuade her to surrender. "Don't make me do this the hard way." A sudden rush of air blew by Sid as a massive tail, bigger than any tree she'd ever climbed, slammed into the pillar on her right. She flinched as pieces of black rock exploded around her. This would be her chance. As quickly as possible, she rolled onto her belly and stretched for the gem. Her fingers found it and quickly picked it up. Once she had it in her hand, she snapped back to her seated position, doing her best to breathe deep through the adrenaline. Now I just need a distraction, she thought. She waited as the dragon made his way over to the decimated pillar, then shuffled her way around to the other side of the table. "Come on, Sid, think," she whispered to herself. "Think about what? Is that the signal?" Nelson's voice sounded in her mind. "That's it," she thought. "Nelson, I need you to create a distraction." Sid did her best to keep her voice down. "My mom is stuck, and the dragon's getting close to finding us." "What are you thinking?" Nelson asked. "May I offer a suggestion?" Rose asked. "Sheila can breathe fire. Have her glide down into the sanctuary and unleash her fire on the dragon. It isn't going to harm him, but aim for his eyes. That might buy us some time. My leg is hurt pretty bad, so you'll need to pick me up first. Sid, you'll need to start running for the throne as soon as you see Sheila pass overhead. We will pick you up on the way out. But won't he just catch us before we fly out? Nelson asked. Normally I'd say yes, but the sanctuary is much more narrow than the throne room. He won't have space to spread his wings. He'll have to chase us on foot until the throne room. And by then, Sid chimed in, we'll be free and clear. Okay, Nelson said, let's give it a shot. Sid started to count, but before she knew it, Nelson and Sheila were already overhead, raining down fire on Ailos. Nelson, Sid yelled, you were supposed to wait for my signal. Sheila whipped around the sanctuary and returned for a second round. Ailos roared in anger. Oops, sorry, I thought, oh, never mind, just come get us. She huffed in frustration and took off running. So far, the plan was working, and Nelson was surprisingly good at flying Sheila. It was hard to stay upset with him, especially while he was risking his life for her. Upset or not, she was totally distracted, and without realizing it, started running in the wrong direction. Instincts drove her towards her mom. After the initial chaos of wild and frantic clawing, Ailos collected himself and changed his plan. When Nelson and Sheila made their final turn, he spewed a river of his own fire. The nimble bird narrowly escaped as she corkscrewed around the flames and around the back of the cathedral. Sid felt the heat push her as she sprinted toward the heap of rubble concealing her mom. No, Sid! The throne room! Go! Rose's voice filled her mind. I was able to heal. Nelson will get me first. You just run for the light. Sid slid to a stop. How could she forget? Now she'd have to run twice as far. She felt her heart wanting to beat its way out of her chest, so she took a deep breath, and with it, a prayer. Make her help us. Her feet dug into the broken stones around her, and then, with a surge of new energy, she ran. By the time she reached the broken table, she looked back and saw Nelson coming straight for her. And then, everything changed. None of them had considered the dragon's ability to shapeshift. The massive dragon disappeared in a flash, taking on the form of an eagle. Hurry! Sid yelled as she crossed the throne room's threshold. He's going to try and block us! But it was already too late. Ailos, the faster version, soared past like a bullet. Again, Sid found herself sliding to a stop in the center of the decrepit throne room. A dark cloud shrouded the eagle, and in an instant, Ailos took his preferred form. Sid was trapped. All she could do now was wait. Sheila let out a loud screech, so loud that Sid and the dragon had to cover their ears. She tucked her wings and plummeted into a full dive. Ailos reared his head in frustration and breathed out another burst of fire. This one wild and misdirected from the piercing headache. Sheila swooped with ease, dodging the flames. Sid didn't waste another moment. She ran toward the plummeting bird and leapt up into the air. As soon as her feet left the ground, she felt Sheila's talons wrap around her. Nelson flew them straight for the dragon, closing the distance to avoid the wailing attacks, much like when a fighter steps into his opponent, taking away their reach. Sid felt her stomach lurch with every change of direction. Then, finally, gravity forced itself against her as they exploded through the hole in the mountain. Sid hollered with joy at the night sky as it greeted them. No more ceilings or dragons to stand in their way, just the open sky and home on the horizon. Behind them, the mountain blew its top, a volcano waking from slumber. Sid may have celebrated a little too soon. The massive silhouette of the dragon soon covered the light from the blood-red moon, and fear swept over her. Judging by the distance, they still had to cover. Sid knew their chances of making it to the cave were slim. To make matters worse, she saw the haunting sight of torches against the side of the mountain. An army of soldiers, men and beasts, waited for them. Twisted and gnarled by the power of the dragon, they waited anxiously to destroy anything and everything that reminded them of the Maker. Sadness and anger filled Sid's heart as they plummeted toward the cave, confronted by the reality that the battle in front of her would only lead to more heartache. Visions of men and beasts being transformed by Ailos' sorcery flooded her mind. Even if they win, the destruction of the dragon of Ailos would haunt her forever. How could she ever undo all of this madness, all of this evil? "Hold on!" Nelson shouted, his new sense of bravery teetering on recklessness. The opening of the cave suddenly swallowed them whole, and Sheila only made it halfway through it before being forced to drop Sid. Without enough room for her wingspan, the majestic bird careened into a crowd of soldiers. The force of her entry forged a perfect path to the back of the cave. Sid, though, had a long way to go, and soldiers were quickly filling in the gap. A bright light to her left pushed back a group of men, knocking them unconscious. Nelson stood glowing in the clearing. He held out the king's stone and let it imbue him with light. With him, Sheila and Harold did their best to intimidate and hold off a separate crowd of beasts, smaller than the ones they had faced so far, but still ferocious. To Nelson's left, Sid watched her mom push back soldiers with her own blast of light. "Sid!" she yelled. "Get to the tunnel!" A blinding light surged, throwing back a crowd of small demon dogs. Sid started to run, but her leg was caught. She couldn't move. "Where do you think you're going?" A thin, raspy voice laughed. Holding on to her foot was something that looked like a human, with a wolf's head. His hand was covered in matted fur and felt ice cold. Sid screamed as she pulled away from the creature. "Let me go!" In a panic, she fell to the ground and kicked at the monster with her free foot. The wolfman yelped as one of her blows connected with its snout, temporarily loosening his grip. Sid did her best to scuttle away, but more and more soldiers began to surround her, snarling and licking their lips. The wolfman stood, holding his bleeding nose. "Now you're going to pay," he said, lifting his sharpened claws. Sid pulled the stone from her pocket, the red stone, the dragon's breath, and held it out in front of her. Slowly, she let the light from inside of her fill it. Her body lifted from the ground, and the crowd of soldiers all stepped back in unison, all except the wolfman. He simply stood in awe, realizing that his master had failed to keep the third stone. As Sid hovered above the army, a still and quiet voice spoke to her. "Fear will always take from you, but the right kind of fear will fill you with great power." Fear. A flood of memories came rushing back every time she used the stone. The emotions she leaned into most was fear. Fear of losing. The voice spoke again. "Ailos can only imitate power. The true power, the only power worth fearing, is..." A loud scream broke her concentration. "Sid, look out!" Nelson yelled. The light from her retreated at the sound of his voice, and her body slammed into the cave floor. When she looked up, she saw it. A claw the size of a boulder rammed into her, pinning her to the ground. With renewed vigor, the army pressed in. Through blurred vision, Sid watched as Nelson fought back a horde of soldiers with nothing but one of her mother's axes and the light of the Maker. Harold bit and clawed as Sheila's fire filled the corner of the cave, and her mother came screaming toward the dragon, with a flaming sword in hand. The dragon let up on Sid, enough for her to wriggle free as he parried a strike from her mother's sword. Flames sparked off his talons as he swiped the blade away with ease. Sid stood up, trying to take advantage of the space, but had to defend herself immediately. Without thinking, a force left her body, sending 3 half-men into the cave wall. Despite this show of power, the army remained vigilant. After fighting off the rest of the soldiers around her, Sid finally had a clear path to safety. At the back of the cave, Nelson had cleared out a tunnel entrance with the help of Sheila and Harold, and was doing his best to recover when she arrived. "Are you okay?" he asked, breathing heavily. Sid just nodded, trying her best to catch her breath too. "What do we do now?" "I don't know," Sid said after a while. "We need to find a way to help." Nelson agreed, but he wasn't feeling very well. "I think I need to sit down." His face looked pale, and his eyes were sunken. His legs started to wobble beneath him. "Whoa, Nelson!" Sid reached out just in time to catch him. She set him down gently against the wall. "Relax, it's okay. Just breathe." "Your mom," he said, pointing a shaky finger. "She needs us." Rose was able to keep the dragon at bay for a long time, forcing him further and further back. But eventually, Ailos had enough, and her sword was no match for his flames. All she could do was dodge and block using her light. His anger turned to rage, and he began filling as much of the cave as possible with fire. Even a few of his own soldiers suffered his wrath as he spewed without discretion. Fortunately for Sid's mom, the chaotic attacks allowed her to slip away. Hidden by the wall of fire, she made it over to Sid and Nelson. "Go!" she commanded, white lines pressed through her soot-covered brow. "I'll keep him back. Get to Ailos and shut the veil." She took the locket from around her neck, Sid's locket from the mountain, and handed it to Nelson. She made eye contact with him and said, "Your promise still remains." Nelson swallowed hard. He still had to find a way to get Sid back to Ailos. Sid looked up in disbelief. "Not without you," she said, shaking her head. "No way." She looked over at Nelson. "I can't." "Sid, you have to. We have a chance to bind him forever. Go, before—" A blast of heat filled the cave as liquid fire consumed the rest of the army in front of them. The sheer power of it knocked Sid and Nelson off their feet and back into the tunnel. "Run!" Rose shouted from her belly. Nelson took hold of Sid's hand and pulled her up onto her feet. "I love you," Rose added, pressing herself onto her feet. Sid ran and hugged her mom. "Please," she cried, "not again." "This is the only way, sweetie." Sid gripped tighter. "Sydney," Rose said, "you have to go. You're the guardian now, which means you have to make sacrifices to keep others safe." "It's okay," she whispered, peeling her daughter's arms from around her neck. "I'll find my way back. Plus, I've got Sheila and Harold to protect me." Rose forced a smile. Sid felt Nelson's arm around her waist. "Come on, Sid. The fire, it's dying." Sid sniffed back tears. "Fine, but I'm coming back for you." One last time, she grabbed her mom and hugged her tight. Then she let Nelson pull her free, but not before slipping something into her mother's pocket. Eventually, Rose, Harold, and Sheila disappeared behind the wall of smoke from the dragon's fire, followed by flashes of flames chasing them out of the cave. Nelson made eye contact with Sid, hoping to get the okay to run. She gave a gentle nod, and the two of them dashed for Ailos. This is Chapter 21 of The Guardian of Ailos, the final chapter. Nelson felt a cool rush of air as he stepped back into Ailos, bringing him an instant sense of relief. By no means did the castle chamber feel cooler or more inviting than the cave of Pyrnos, but it did represent something far more hopeful. He was finally on his way home. He threw up his hands over his head and drew in a long, deep breath. He and his friends had been in some form of travel or flight since sunup. Even with, or possibly because of, his newly found power, his body felt exhausted. "Sid, can you believe it? He turned around to see that Sid still hadn't come across. "Great," he muttered, between breaths. His shoulders collapsed and his arms fell to his side in frustration. "Please don't make me go back in there." He waited, staring intently at the veil in front of him. And just before he decided to throw himself back through the veil once more, Sid's face popped through. "Thank you," he sighed. "I thought I was going to have to come back for you." The rest of her body slowly made it through the darkness, and as it did, something small caught his eye. Dust sparkling, but not moving. Wait a second, Nelson thought. It must have been too dark to notice the first time we opened it. Indeed, Nelson just discovered that time slowed down in Pyrnos, just like when Nelson first entered through the oak tree. Strange. He shook his head. He could try figuring that out later. Right now, he just wanted to hug his friend. Unfortunately, the hug she returned felt weak. He pulled away and saw her face saddened with grief, her arms limp by her side as she stared at the ground. He tried to make eye contact while searching for words to say. None would come. Oh no, her mom. He realized in that moment the gravity of Sid's loss. For him, he got to return to his home, nothing changing. For her, she experienced the hope of reunion, only to have it stripped away. I'm sorry, Sid, but there's no time. We have to shut the door. Nelson was right. They had a mission to complete. Sid did her best to put on a brave face. You're right, she said. Let's finish this. Nelson forced the door closed and made sure it clicked all the way into place. Then Sid lifted her locket and said the mysterious words one last time. When the floor finally stopped vibrating, Nelson slumped down against the door and let out a deep breath. Sid joined him. Silence quickly washed over them. Usually this kind of silence would terrify Nelson, but instead of the awful feeling of skin crawling or someone creepy watching him, Nelson only felt peace. Something he hadn't experienced since the night his dad left. He closed his eyes and rested his head on Sid's shoulder. A smile of contentment grew wide on his face. After a long pause, Sid spoke up. You're a good friend. She put her hand on his leg. In the darkness she couldn't see, but his smile stretched even further. Nelson covered her hand with his own and whispered back, I know. Sid's hand lifted, and the next thing Nelson felt was a punch in the shoulder. Ow, he said, the drama thick in his tone. What? I am. You said it. Then the sweetest of sounds filled the air. Laughter. The lockets seemed to enjoy it too. Their light began to glow, revealing the old castle chamber. After the echoes of their joy faded, Nelson stood up and reached out his hand. So, how do you think we do this? Bind Ailos for good. We have all 3 gems. We close the veil, and... Sid bit her lip. Nelson saw it and squinted. What's that? He asked. What? She bit her lip again. What do you mean, what? That? Why are you biting your lip like that? He pointed at the white marks on her lips. Well, you see, actually, we only have 2. What? Nelson gasped. But I thought, Sid, without the third one, the dragon, he... Nelson let out a growl. Sid hung her head. I'm sorry, I just couldn't bear to leave her in there. Not without a way to fight back. Sid looked up to explain. When I realized that there was no way for all three of us to make it out, I took the red stone and slipped it into my mom's pocket. Her eyes widened as she hurried on to say, that way she would at least have something to help. A deep sigh escaped Nelson's lungs. His blood ran hot. He knew he couldn't stay upset. What she did made sense, but still, he needed time to cool off. Okay, he finally said. How long do you think they've got? They can make it back through with the other stone, right? I don't know, Sid said. My mom is strong, but it didn't look good. And you felt the fire too, right? She paused and shook her head. No, they'll be all right. I know it. And we'll figure out a way to get them back. Wait, Nelson said. You aren't planning to go back there, are you? Sid nodded. But first, I need to learn more. More about the locket, the dragon, all of it. Nelson couldn't believe it. A loud hiss fell from his lips. You can't be serious. We just made it out of there. Sid, I don't know how many more times I can... Before he could finish his complaint, she pressed a finger into his lips. Then she hugged him tight. I'm not asking you to. Not now. I'm tired, and I know that all three of them are going to be fine. For now, I think it's time to go home. Oh, thank goodness. Nelson exhaled and dramatically melted into her arms, leaving her to hold most of his weight. You know how long I've been waiting for you to say that? I thought you were about to make me go back in there. Yeah, Sid just smiled, pushing his dead weight off of her, and walked over to the door with the Guardian on it. Plus, it's about time you took a shower. You stink. She placed her locket into place, and light began to fill the room. You know, Nilsson said as the door cracked open, I think I'm going to miss this place. Really? Sid looked surprised as she backed her way through the door. Yeah, right, he laughed as he followed. Sid joined in once again and rolled her eyes. As they stepped out into the familiar surroundings of their own world, the weight of their adventure settled upon them. Sid took a deep, satisfied breath. It feels like we've been gone for years, she said, stretching. Nelson nodded, understanding the feeling. You know the strangest part? He asked, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. We saved our world. He cocked his head. Well, kind of. For now, at least. Anyway. And no one will ever know. I mean, look. He pointed toward the setting sun. We'll be home before dinner, after all. Sid's face fell slightly at the reminder of her mother, still trapped in Pyrnos. Yeah, she sighed. It's like nothing really changed. Nelson saw the sadness in her eyes and couldn't help but feel responsible. Don't worry, we'll find a way to get her back, he said, determination in his voice. We will finish what we started. I know, she said. It's just, I was this close to having my mom back. Sid stopped and turned toward Nelson. Promise me something. Anything, he said. Promise me you'll help me get her back. Nelson swallowed hard. It wasn't easy thinking about going back to that place. Still, he reassured his friend. Of course we will. We're in this together, remember? Together, she agreed. As they made their way out of the cave, Nelson couldn't help but marvel at how ordinary everything looked. The trees, the rising moon, the distant sounds of the town. It all seemed so mundane after what they'd been through. Nelson, Sid stopped, grabbing his arm, her voice sincere. Thank you for everything. I couldn't have done any of this without you. Nelson felt his cheeks flush. Hey, that's what friends are for, right? Besides, you're the one who got us through most of it. You're the guardian, remember? Sid shook her head. Maybe, but I couldn't have made it without you, Nell. Don't ever forget that. Nelson couldn't help but smile. Then, a look of mischief glinted in his eyes. Race you home? Sid grinned. You're on. As the sun slowly set behind the trees, Nelson found himself crawling back through his apartment window, taking off his shoes and climbing into bed. He was too tired for anything else. Just before nodding off, a knock came at the door. Sweetie? A sweet, soothing voice called out. I'm about to head out, okay? Dinner's in the oven. Thanks, Mom, he replied from beneath his blanket. Oh, and, sweetie, make sure to take a shower before bed. You know how stinky you get when you've been out playing all day. Nelson groaned, starting to grow annoyed and a little upset that she was basically quoting Sid. Okay, Mom. Oh, and tell Sid hello for me the next time you see her. I really like her, you know. She's a good friend. Keeps you out of trouble. Nelson coughed. If only. What was that? Bye, Mom. Good night, sweetie. See you in the morning. Nelson puffed out a breath of air and turned over to look at the picture frame on his bedside table. She is a good friend, he said to the image of his mom in her blue summer dress. More than that, he thought. She's the Guardian of Ailos. His eyes shot open. If she's the Guardian, then what does that make me? He shrugged. It didn't matter. Not really. She was his friend, and that was good enough for him. He drifted off to sleep, pondering this wonderful truth. His friend, the Guardian of Ailos. A truth that no one would ever dare to believe. Unless, of course, they did. The end of Book 1 of The Guardian of Ailos. Friends, thank you so much for listening along. I hope that you've enjoyed it as much as I have reading it out loud. As you know, this is an early edition of the book, and I can't wait to get the final draft out and into your hands later this year. For now, this is farewell, but I can't wait to see you again soon in the land of Ailos.